Hi everyone, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about why dreaming or basically being in the visionary archetype is important. So welcome to my channel. My name is Ariel and my business name is Ariel's Heart, and my work is basically all around the intersection between healing and how do we make culture change, how do we change the world, and calling and working with those of us who really feel called to work in service, in mission-driven work. So that's the work I do. I'm a healer and I do one-on-one healing and also community healing. Today I want to talk about why is dreaming important. And so basically what we're going to talk about is all of this through a healing perspective of how individual healing has to do with collective healing, and why is it so important when we are trying to bring more ancestral wisdom, more land-based wisdom of how to create new systems. So I'm going to go into 3 reasons why it's important to dream. And the first reason is that so there's something, and this happens both personally and on a collective level. So when we start to imagine and envision for our life and our communities a world that's completely different than the world that we live in now, it starts to get us into a place of seeing the contrast. We start to feel the things come up that might be fears. So for example, all of this we can learn on a personal level. So if I want to be in a leadership position at my work, I might start to try to imagine myself in that position, or even if it's not a super active practice, if that's something I want, I'm starting to imagine it as a possibility in the world, right? And so I'm starting to orient to that future. And so as I'm orienting to that future, things may come up. Fears of, people don't believe in me, I'm not confident enough for this, or not believing in my own skills. So those are things I'm going to have to work through to then be able to orient and keep walking towards this path. And that's why sometimes not dreaming possibilities for our lives, both personally and collectively, can be a defense mechanism, right? Because we feel that if I really think of that as a possibility, then I'm going to start to have to feel what's blocking me from that. That I don't actually believe in myself enough, or I don't believe in my community enough, that something else that's better is actually possible. And so then we have to actually grapple with those feelings and be with those feelings. And so that is such an important step, right? Because we have so much conditioning that the current world is the world that we're supposed to be living in. But I would say it's not. We don't have to live this way. We're told that we have to live this way. There's a lot of cultural conditioning and cultural norms that this is the way that we should live. So breaking out of that is a huge process, and it's an active process. And I always say having hope for something better, being optimistic about change, is actually a very active process. So by orienting to this reality, you're also starting the embodiment practice of this reality, right? Because our conditioning often tells us, and community conditioning that's like status quo conditioning of the way things are, tell us basically that there's one possibility for the world that's possible, right? So for example, the idea that war is something that's always going to go on, and whether or not you specifically believe in that or not, this is just an example, right? But it is something that a lot of people believe, right? That just fundamentally, at least anywhere in the next 100 years, hundreds of years, there's going to be war. And so if you start to say, oh, actually don't know, I think we could actually do something different. I think as a country we could start to try to orient to a new reality. That's going to actually trigger people, because now their path of it feeling like one direction is now being challenged, in that it's not actually, or there's also something being added to it, that there's actually not just one direction, there's also something else potentially. And also obviously they might not agree with you, but then they also have the choice to actually question what they believe in. So they start to have to process, well, I'm actually choosing to believe that war is the only option, which is okay for people, but it can be a triggering process, right? And so by you orienting to a different reality, you're starting to bring up kind of little sparks of possibility that something else is possible, right? So in the criminal justice system, if you say, most people just believe that policing is the only way to there's not other solutions that are actually possible. So if you start to talk about something else, or start to build something else, or whatever it is, or just, embody that other possibility, it's gonna bring up things for people, and it's gonna be this little spark in community that's not necessarily even bad. It's going to be activating, so then it shows people there's another option. So the people who are ready for it, who are ready for a different possibility, will start to then probably move towards that direction, right? Or whatever their own truth is that's different from the main path that everyone's walking towards. And so that is an important point of what the first point is, of showing us the gap of where we want to go and where we are now, both personally and as a community. And so going back to the leader example, it's just also the principle in healing that things have to happen energetically before they happen physically. And so that might sound, woo-woo or whatever it is, but just again, that if I want to move to a leadership position, both I might have to work through the things that are blocking me internally, like fears, but I also will probably have to embody, start to learn different qualities that maybe I don't know yet. So I might have to learn management skills that I don't know. So I might take a management class, I might read some management books, because then I'll be able to have those skills developed, right? If we want to orient towards a world that's more community oriented, we have to learn how to live in community. We have to learn how to have conflict. So we might have to, when we're orienting towards a community-based world, then within each of ourselves and as a community, we are going to have to start to build, to kind of take the mini steps to get to that reality, right? Of, okay, how do I have nonviolent communication? How do I have this other skill that I need if I really want to build community? How do I work through my own community wounds and trust wounds if I want to live in that way? If you see me keep moving around, I only have in-unit air conditioning, and it's not in this room, but this room's the best setup, and it's summer in Texas, so so that's why I'm moving around. I'm kind of hot. Okay, so number 2. Okay, I kind of always do this, but I think that saying the steps is easier for people to digest, because my brain can weave in all these different concepts. But the second one is that why dreaming is important is it allows us to embody a different frequency in the world, or a different path, right? So if people think, okay, there's a path, there's only one path, and then all of a sudden you're opening up a fork in the road, right? And so what I think, I already talked about this a lot, but what I think is an additional point that to me is, a new model of how change should be made, is instead of it being, I'm gonna create change in the world by forcing people to change, by going to family gatherings. I see this kind of post a lot around the holidays, that something about if you're not really taking appropriate responsibility for what's going on in the world, if you're not kind of, having these hard conversations with your relatives and calling them out and stuff. And I personally have not had a good experience with that. I used to when I was younger. I feel like I went through this whole personal experiment as a lawyer of or going through law school and really embodying that debate energy, that I would have a conversation. I said, okay, I want to be in a world where we can talk through issues and see if that's possible, that can make a change. So I would literally talk through every issue with every single person who was willing to. And what I found in that experience is that, you know, multiple things, but that there's a lot about what energy we're bringing. If we're trying to bring into the conversation changing people's minds, we're probably never going to change people's minds because they can feel that dominating energy. And a lot of the times it actually makes them like dig their heels in because people don't like to be controlled. So that's one thing. So I recognize now that when there's topics that I can't be neutral with, or I can't be neutral with specific people, and those conversations might be ones I'm less likely to have. But also I think that change happens by, presenting different information for people kind of as like, okay, this is an offering, but not by trying to force people to change. I don't think that personally works. I think it actually makes people more stubborn within their beliefs, and actually maybe might make them more radically on the opposite side, which I think we see often in politics. You know, it's like when feminism is happening, then there's a counter movement of, you know, people who are like, that's bashing men, and women hate men, and like it's just the counter. There's always this counter movement when there's a hardcore on the other side. And, you know, it's not like we can always prevent that, but I do think by trying to control people and not also giving some room for their own personal experience, you know, underneath their political opinion, then it's going to keep lending itself to that. So anyways, it could be a whole other class, but I just personally think that most people, you know, they have a reason why they believe what they believe, and so that underlying reason, often people want to feel heard and respected for that reason, which is legitimate, right? It doesn't have to be like my needs in the world are more important than your needs in the world. That's a false dichotomy. It's like we don't actually need to live that way, though politics makes it that way often. And so anyways, so this was all a digression of just how I don't personally think that going into arguments and trying to force people into having the view you have works. I've never had that happen as something that works. And I really experimented with a lot of conversations and making good points and all of that stuff. And I don't think it worked one time. And so, not to say that people won't change their opinion later, but just, it's like, what is our goal, right? So this all to say, how I personally think now that change is going to happen is that we're embodying a different frequency. So we're seeing there's this one path of how things things should go. And then now you're showing kind of a different possibility, right? Then that will, like, because you're embodying that will activate something in people, which that's why it's kind of hard, because you have to deal with that energy that some people aren't going to like, that feeling of being activated. And so people will either they could be neutral, they could have a negative reaction, but they could also have like, why would you ever believe that peace is possible? You're so naive, to think that we cannot have war, blah, blah, blah. And then there can be another reaction of people like, oh, I actually have always really felt that deep down. I never really realized it. And so it's activating something in themselves that they really, maybe on a subconscious level, knew that they wanted, but they're ready for it. Or it could go in the back of their mind for something later, right? When they are ready. Like, oh, I remember Ariel was talking about this thing at Thanksgiving dinner. And, now I want to talk to her more about that. Or I remember the things she said to me, or, of that something else is possible. So in that way, we're kind of this light of something else, this new, different energy. And then I think of it as going to be like a domino effect. So, right, the people who are ready will start to embody that then. And then the other people, and then other people, and then people who are ready at that time. And then it can get bigger and bigger, where that energy is bigger than all the status quo energy, right? And to me, that's how culture change happens. And also, it's just always so important to remember culture change is possible, because I always am just always so humbled, and my mind is boggled by just even when I go to a different country and the culture is so different. So it just shows everything is taught to us, you know? And so change is possible. That's my big emphasis. Okay, third point. By dreaming a new world, it allows us to build things that are actually new, right? So because I think the reason why is it's because, like, why is it mechanically this way? But I think it's partly because, you know, the change that we're having to go through. I personally also relate to it being this, that when we're dreaming a new world and visualizing, we're also kind of being co-creators of the new world, right? So those of us who are called to this work are, you know, maybe pulling down visions or however you want to think of it, but embodying visions of, you know, a more spiritually embodied world, right? Of visions of just, you know, instead of things being all oppression based, what is something that would be really like my heart would be pouring into it? It'd be more egalitarian, it'd be more with the land, and that we're bringing that energy into the world, right? To me, that's also what the embodiment of heart medicine is, which is my business name, of bringing in like our heart divine essence, you know. And when you really see art that's completely new and courageous and going to change things, of the way that women are represented, or people of color are represented, it's just completely new. And so because it's so new, you can feel it shakes things up, that energy, right? And so a lot of the times we can have change in the world, but it's still, we haven't done the healing of these underlying things. And so it's the same stuff, right? So, you know, we can have different presidents, but in my opinion, a lot of it can be the same stuff, right? We're dealing still with a lot of institutional corruption, no matter who is in office in the past, right? And so a lot of things can be in this kind of war energy, right? Where we want to fight for who's on top, who has power, all of these things. And so we have to actually heal all of just like the foundations, right? To build something completely new. And so to me, when we're coming really in this possibility of just imagining from nothing, I'm not dreaming based off of what I know about, you know, my city council. I'm dreaming from a completely just blank place, like imagining myself just visioning from the stars of what is possible in the world, you know, and what kinds of things can we have. I imagine communities where we're all, you know, we're all buying only local, not in a way that's like anti other countries, but in a way that we're supporting each other and we're not supporting extractive labor anymore. You know, we're supporting art. We're able to exchange these things, and then also when I allow myself to just imagine freely and vision freely, then I may realize like, okay, that's actually not something that we can do, you know, next year. But what would be the path, as we were talking about earlier? And so then from there I can go, okay, this is the first step, this thing, and I'm really letting the, you know, free reign to imagine anything in the world. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty much a good wrap up. This was a good length. But thank you so much for coming. I have a Dreamers Council in 2 hours, so I'm sure that will be passed by the time I upload this. But I'm planning on trying to do it every month, do some type of Dreamers event. And so that's why I kind of wanted to do this, because I don't know if people really know what I mean by that. And so I wanted to make this video so you can follow my newsletter for future events below on the bio or whatever the captions. I'm pretty new to YouTube. And then the The other event I have is called Divine Leadership, and that is enrolling right now until the end of this month. And that is all about kind of what we're talking about of really starting to embody our heart energy and creations in the world and leadership, and what are we meant to embody that's going to be creating something different, and working through in a healing perspective the blocks to that. So it's kind of a blend between healing and practical, but also, you know, I believe that the healing journey is super cyclical. I follow that. And so because of that, where you are on the journey, I was just talking to someone about this, but you know, you might not be in the place to take action, and that's totally fine. And we can work on the things you're supposed to be working on, which might be the healing things to start to get to the embodiment. But just kind of what we're talking about in this video, well, that's the long-term thing, but then what's the step now, and working through that. And my work's very intuitive, so I respond to who's there, and so I definitely respond to you, and I do one-on-one sessions, and I'm also working on fixing up my offering on embodying, I think it's called Embodying Purpose, which is one-on-one. So anyways, you can find the information below. Thanks for coming by. I hope you have a good rest of the day.